The world as we know it is becoming more and more urban as populations continue to migrate to cities at record pace. Once largely agrarian, today our species has become urban. And since cities are the habitat of our species, it's no longer enough to make our cities work. We need a new paradigm for understanding how our cities can thrive. Now, we've been building cities for a long time, but how we think about our cities is far too partitioned. It's the old industrial and mechanistic approach in which we believe we can optimize production simply by pulling the right levers the right way. What this older model fails to take into account, however, is the hidden human ecosystem that feeds these outputs, and how our actions always affect this ecosystem, causing unintended results and consequences. Think about how problems normally get dealt with. It's like an elaborate game of whack-a-mole, with economic growth and monetary investment as the hammer for every issue. We strike at one problem with cash and metrics, another arises, or worsens, ad infinitum. Sometimes we believe the next whack might solve everything, hoping naively for a silver bullet. Increasingly, we ask that before you whack, you come armored in data to prove that your issue is worth whacking at in the first place. After all, we are living in an information economy, which means that our institutions can no longer point to legacy or tradition to establish societal value. Everything, from the opera to the local soup kitchen, must now demonstrate its value through quantitative measurement of performance and outcome, which has sent everyone, advocates, leaders, scholars, scrambling for the most elaborate assessment tools in which to mine an ever-increasing sea of data, more of it to be generated in the next 4 years than in the history of the world, a rate that is growing exponentially. Data is the only currency we all seem to agree on, but data can be notoriously elusive. Moreover, this alliance around data tends to reduce a project's total value to fiscal viability, rather than examining the entirety of its worth to the urban ecosystem. Now, don't get us wrong. Data is great where it exists and where it's used well. It illuminates patterns yet unseen and paves the way for critical self-evaluation and improvement, and even vital breakthroughs. We are data enthusiasts. But we also advocate that data, like money, is not enough. In order to better utilize data for wise action and meaningful change, we need to implement a new paradigm that filters data through a holistic and human-centered lens that takes into account the whole of the ecology of a community, which is exactly why we started the Thriving Cities Project, a dynamic initiative run by a group of unconventional urbanists and pioneers. We embrace the approach of urban human ecology by employing a framework that sharpens our insights into what powers and sustains the programs, institutions, and policies that make for a thriving urban ecosystem. Because when the ecology of our cities thrive, we as a species thrive as well. The first important result of our paradigm is that we define thriving in terms of a holistic sense of a community's wealth and well-being. The concept of human ecology encourages us to think about the shape, character, and normative purposes of actual places and people in culturally and historically interactive terms. This means that economic prosperity is an important factor, but only one of many factors. Our framework looks at 6 fundamental areas that form the building blocks of human thriving: the realm of human knowledge and learning, the true; the realm of social mores and ethics, the good; the realm of creativity, aesthetics, and design, the beautiful; the realm of natural and physical health, the sustainable; the realm of political and civic life, the just; the realm of economic life, the prosperous. We call these 6 realms endowments because, like a financial endowment, they all have qualities that become the capital that produces human thriving, which accrues over time. Our framework focuses on discerning the health of each endowment, the resources, practices, institutions, and places that are assets to an urban ecosystem, or the resources, practices, institutions, and places that are its deficits. Crucially, we don't look at these categories in isolation. Rather, they are all interconnected without hierarchy, because the thriving of a city happens when these endowments operate as one. For instance, consider the symbiosis between education and tax base. It's no secret that well-funded schools perform better than schools without healthy fiscal support. And often this fiscal support is directly linked to the income of a community's tax base. Poor tax base, poor school. Strong tax base, strong school. So here we have a clear interconnection between the prosperous, the realm of economic life, and the true, the realm of human knowledge and learning. Or consider how each of the endowments are interconnected physically in the design of public spaces, from sidewalks and parks to city squares and public transportation. Each contributes to the possibilities of our quality of life, sociality, political voice, and civic pride. Each illustrates the interconnection between multiple endowments. The truth is, every endowment is interconnected in similar ways, and they all impact each other. Now, by filtering data through this grid of endowments, we are able to gain holistic insights that show how every civic and public action affects the wealth and well-being of the entire city. When we do this, we find virtuous feedback loops that promote thriving across every endowment, just as we find feedback loops that deplete the ecosystem as a whole. Most importantly, such insights create the possibility of seeing the interconnected nature of our challenges, and thus pave the way for common action. We can now come together as a community and formulate interconnected solutions. Building on this sort of connectivity leads to further collaboration, which takes into account everyone's interests. The equation gives rise to uncommon coalitions between groups of people that don't typically work together, which in turn underscores the centrality of commitment. We can only do this in credible and sustainable ways if we are committed to working for the good of our neighbors and communities, often in the face of significant challenges. We call these human inputs. They are like nutrients that every city's endowments feed off of to become healthier. This creates yet another virtuous feedback loop, where endowment thinking nurtures the human inputs, with these inputs then bolstering the endowments that further a city's wealth and well-being. This is the cycle that creates thriving. By the way, these are really the things that have always made human communities thrive. So while this paradigm feels new, it's really about getting us back to basics. What's also important to understand is that while endowments are ever present in human communities, they function uniquely within the particular context of each urban center. This is the pragmatic promise of thriving cities. By applying the Thriving Cities methodology, we can generate highly specific insights that are distinct to that city's signature. Here's a real example from Portland, Oregon, that affirms and illuminates the philosophical lifeblood of the Thriving Cities project. Now, Portland is known for its cutting-edge urban planning and beautiful aesthetics, natural as well as built. The city routinely places ahead of much larger cities in the best of rankings, despite a smaller GDP than its rivals. The city's popularity has driven a massive migration of young professionals to the area who share the city's passion for green living and progressive values. However, this description falters on the fact that the dream of Portland remains largely a white dream. Racial disparities underscore neglected civic fundamentals that, if not solved, will ultimately erode the city's social fabric and urban promise. A perfect capture of this tension was revealed in a recent bike lane proposal. The largely white bicycling advocacy community was surprised to encounter significant local opposition to improve a 28-block bikeway in northeast Portland, a historically predominant African-American neighborhood. What had been wrongly assumed as a non-controversial issue was rife with the long shadow of racial history and politics in Portland. The lack of diversity on the project's advisory committee evoked pent-up resentments and painful memories of how the African-American community has been largely neglected and adversely affected by Portland's urban renewal. The white lanes, as they came to be called, were understandably perceived as a precursor for greater gentrification in the area and subsequent displacement, framing a wider problem for the way sustainability is often pursued in Portland, as well as in other cities. See, under the old model that we looked at earlier, city leaders tend to concentrate on expensive technological solutions, like energy efficiency or transportation alternatives, that sidestep more embedded issues, such as race and social inequality. The Northeast Portland bicycle lanes controversy had a promising end, however, which demonstrates just how deeply interconnected the endowments really are, as well as how an endowment such as sustainability can be more holistic, justice-oriented, and inclusive. Once African American residents vocalized their objections, the process was restarted. The new dialogue acknowledged the pain caused by gentrification and racial discrimination, and the advisory committee was restructured to include more minority members, with the entire plan being redrafted to square with the needs of everyone involved. What began as a simple green initiative struck at a much deeper issue, leading to an exciting alternative and a path toward better conversations about racial equity. In this case, Portland was able to leverage the strength of one endowment to engage a weaker one, through the bridging of unusual coalitions, cooperation, and a promise of greater commitment to the difficult but essential process of addressing neglected civic fundamentals. And it's this kind of connectivity, collaboration, and commitment across a diverse network of unusual coalitions that drives the Thriving Cities project. Because when we cultivate the endowments of the entire urban ecology, every citizen is more aligned in the shared goal of improving the city for a shared future. Find out more. Visit our website at thrivingcities.com.